And it is now my great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Michael Chamoun, who is a Sierra Club member. He's been a member of the West LA group since 2004. He's a Santa Monica native, and last year he presented one of the most spectacular stories and sets of images from his ascent of Denali via the West Buttress, which he did in 2018, just stunning images. And so when he mentioned last year that he had backpacked the 800-mile Hayduke Route through some of the most beloved national parks and monuments, I immediately asked if he could, come back for an encore and do another presentation for the West LA group of the Sierra Club. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Michael Chamoun. Please, quietly or silently, you can do it with your waving your hands. Welcome gifted storyteller and outstanding photographer, Michael Chamoun.
Well, David, you've built me up a little too much, I think. But thanks for having me again. It's my pleasure to be doing this for you guys. And I guess I'm gonna just get right into it because I got a lot of slides, and hopefully this will go pretty smoothly. So this is sort of a decade in the making here. I've heard about the Hayduke since 2008 or 9, and it was conceived in 98 and 2000 by these two guys, Joe Mitchell and Mike Cornella. And they, in homage to Ed Abbey, they sort of connected this route together, this circuitous route that starts in Arches National Park and meanders through Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, Bryce Canyon, Grand Canyon, and Zion, and then connecting all sort of wilderness areas and national recreational areas and national monuments. Bears Ears is included in this before it was shrunk. And so it's just this incredible route. It's a mix of, jeep track, game trail, plenty of off-route. You're just wading through rivers through some of it. It's just a hodgepodge of stuff just to make this wonderful exploration of the Colorado Plateau. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's not for sort of beginner backpackers. There's all sorts of hazards listed here: flash floods, and in our case, heat, little water, really difficult terrain, not in terms of elevation gain or loss, but just rough terrain. There are sections of trail and jeep road that make it really nice on certain days, but certain days are pretty rough as well. And it's really remote. So, and dealing with permits, there's not one continuous permit like the PCTA gives a permit for the PCT. You just have to figure out when you're going to land in the Grand Canyon 550 miles later. And because they're so strict, you just have to be able to work the logistics of that as well. And we'll talk about it more, but some people, it's remote enough where people cache water and cache food, and at certain spots you can drive to them and dump stuff there. But we did not. We chose to just resupply at five. We mailed food at five towns, and then we bought food at certain towns a couple times more, or a few times more. So all in all, 8 resupply points, and we never cached water. And some days we regretted that because of just the lack of water out there. But we'll get to that in a moment. So my friend Garrett Christensen, who I backpacked across Iceland with, and I've done backpacked across Death Valley with in 2009. He's kind of one of the only people that I know that could be able to take the time off to do this with me. So I broached the subject probably in 2014 or 15, and over time he was able to collect vacation time, and we were supposed to do it in the spring of 2020 because that's after winter, there's more water, and then COVID came, and it kind of put a wrench in our plan, a monkey wrench, some would say, in our plans. And so we just kind of played the wait and see game, and we were able to get out in the fall, or actually late summer. And we were the only people out there initially when we went out. So let me just get right into it. So this is kind of the gear you're seeing here. I'm not going to really get into the details of every single thing, but our water capacity was probably about 7.5 liters.
Michael,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Please share your screen again.
Did it go disappear?
Yeah, seemed like it.
Alrighty. How about now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, well, did you hear me at least?
Yes, your voice was perfect, and the screen looks great too.
Okay, now it's good. I was wondering why everybody disappeared for a moment. All right, so I don't know if anybody saw this, but here we are. You know, I was kind of talking about that. That's the route itself on the map, and you can see how it's just kind of circuitous. There's no point to point; they just kind of end arbitrarily in some ways. And so here's the gear that I brought with me, just kind of the rough gear list. So we started in late summer. It was hot the entire trip. There were a few nights up high on the rims where it was cold, but generally it was really hot. So I brought a quilt, didn't even bring a sleeping bag. And we, just kept it light for the most part. 17.5 is pretty heavy, I would say, generally for me. But in this case, we needed a lot of water capacity, camera. I ended up sending my tripod home, but small stuff like that to make the journey sort of memorable, and kind of, the maps were heavy. We brought paper maps as well as GPS and all that kind of stuff. Here we are. So this is me flying into the Moab International Airport and from Denver. And, out of all the sunny days we had, the first 3 days of the trip were terribly cold and rainy. But after that, it was just sun and heat the rest of the time. I mean, that's kind of the desert. It's a fluctuation of extremes. And we started at the Moab Airport. Theoretically, typically, this route starts in Salt Valley. It's in the middle of Arches National Park. But the logistics to get there are kind of a pain in the butt. So there are many alternates on this. You're going to learn that there are many alternates on this route. You don't have to go follow this particular way. Remember, that's a lot of off trail. You kind of just make your way and you kind of find the best route. So that's Garrett and I, and we're starting obviously in the rain, in the cold, and we just started hiking from the airport, and we just walked right into Arches National Park, which is right across the street. And immediately after a bit, you start to see some of the arches that are available. And look, there's tons of names for these arches. I can remember a few, but generally you get a sense of what kind of land we're traversing here. I think one of them's called, actually, I don't even remember. I'm not gonna even try. Yeah, this is Double Arch, because you can see the two circular arches there. And so this is our first day still. So we literally, from the airport at 2:00, we started hiking. We were able to get a camp spot at Devil's Campground, kind of because the weather was so bad, there were open campsites. So we were kind of lucky in that way. And the next day we meandered through, and we ended up getting to Courtright Wash. This is kind of our first introduction to a little bit of off route. And we kind of ran into this. This is a little video of what happened. Great. So that's the route. There's a beaver pond right in the middle of the wash. I mean, this is kind of what we're dealing with here. There is no easy route. So we found a way around it and took kind of an alternate way to get to Moab, which is very close. We immediately go into town on the second day, and that's where I resupplied. I didn't want to bring all this food with me, but anyway. And after Moab, so this is sort of the petroglyphs of, I think it's called the Birthing Rock. This was sadly vandalized last week or 2 weeks ago. I don't remember when exactly, but some white supremacist stuff that I don't know, these people did it in the early morning. They kind of defaced a lot of these figures, but obviously we saw them without, obviously fresh and clean and undisturbed. So these are 1,000 years old. And from what I read, it's archaic to the Ute period, including ancestral Puebloan era images. And you can see on the left-hand photo, that's literally the birthing, that person kind of, that woman, or, giving birth, I guess. So, but it was incredible. It was a massive rock on all four sides. They were littered with petroglyphs. And this is going up Canyon Road. and that's Canyon Creek right there. And there's a lot out of Moab. It wasn't my favorite. There's a lot of ATVs, a lot of people out there. Doesn't really look like it, but certainly there were a lot. And I was especially glad to kind of get away from that town as we moved along. And so we cross over Hurrah Pass, and now we're descending down into you can start to see a little bit of the Colorado. And we've reached it. Now this, unbeknownst to us, this water was kind of the last source for, I don't know, 30 miles. You'll see in a bit later on how there was a water chart. I mean, this route has been done enough, and there's sort of, there's a lot of objective opinions on it about where the water sources are, but I mean, 80% of it was bunk. Didn't even matter. It's really dry. So this is in the late summer, September 9, 10, and there wasn't a monsoon during the summer. So a lot of the water sources were dried up. So here we are trying to, Garrett just kind of siddling his way down. He's sitting on a loose pile of dirt. He could drop in the water at any moment, and then so he's like, you can see him kind of filling up a 1 liter bottle, and I'm standing there picking up the bottle and we're filling up about 10 liters worth of stuff at this moment. And that takes a bit of time, and getting through the tamarisk brush was really annoying, and we didn't know exactly where to go to make it more clear, but we ended up getting to the river after some detours. And we continued on. Now we kind of the crowds disappeared. We're still on Jeep Road, but these were kind of really rough four-wheel drive roads, and we're just kind of working our way down. And you'll see on a lot of this trip, there are so many dry falls. Obviously, a dry fall is a waterfall without water, and you can see how big it can get, and you got to find your way around it. And in certain cases, you have to use a line. You can see that green cord that I'm kind of dealing with. Even this one, which is like 10 feet, it's not an easy down. It's really slippery and loose. There's not really any handholds. In this particular case, we actually found a different way around, but we did pull out the cord just in case. And we used it later on in the trip. And so 30 miles later, we get to quote unquote Indian Creek, a supposed reliable water source, and there's no creek. It's just this kind of puddle of, well, let's see if I have this is the Indian Creek. Yeah, this is just what you got. You can see all the animal footprints. It's kind of murky. There's like weird things in the water. Obviously not clear. So that was kind of what we were dealing with. It was cold at least, but it was an issue. And so from there, from Indian Creek, I will say this, that our biggest stressor was water. No question. The route was difficult, but what kind of sat on our minds every day was just, when's our next water source? When's our next water source? We have to get water because, you're basically screwed out there if you run out of water. It's really hot. Every day was, after those first few days, every day was like in the 90s. It was fairly sweltering, and there's no protection. And now we're getting closer to Canyonlands. So Canyonlands was only 80 miles into the trip. And you can see this is the Needles District. You can see back in the far background why they gave it that name. And now we're on the Slick Rock in Needles at Canyonlands National Park. We had gotten to a campground there, and we were able to fill up our water and rest and kind of hide away from the sun a little bit. But that was the only water source. I mean, there was literally nothing between Indian Creek and beyond there. And you can see the route. You're just on sandstone. In certain areas, there's cairns, especially in this national park where it's kind of established. And you kind of follow the cairns. You're going up and down. It's hard rock. It's hot, so we're carrying maximum capacity now. So 7.5 liters plus probably 6 days of food along with our gear. So, and you're not on a regular trail, so it can get pretty tedious. And so here's some pictures from Canyonlands. You can start to see a little bit. Pretty spectacular, just really unique formations. I mean, I've never seen anything like it before. So there's a few districts in this of Canyonlands, and this is the Needles district. So this is a really cool section here. Yeah, this was they they call this the joint trail. So this wasn't technically on the route. I think the authors had us go closer to the Colorado River, but why would we miss some of the best parts of Canyonlands? I'd never been there before. So we just rejoined the route later by taking these these established routes in the park and seeing some of the best scenery. And this was one of them. It was probably at least a half mile long of just having walls that close in. And this is, some more of the Canyonlands stuff. And you can see we're on a dirt road now, 4-wheel drive. We're about to exit the south end of the park. And what you see here is what we did for the next 35 days, essentially, minus the resupply points. We just slept out. The weather was so warm. Some nights were probably in the 80s. It just never cooled down. And we just slept out, and it was perfectly fine and wonderful. And there's nothing like the desert night sky to make you appreciate sleeping outdoors. So just without a tent or anything. And it was a pain in the butt. You can see that the dirt can be really soft or really hard. It's not really conducive to setting up tarps. So we just kind of kept it away. Back to the water situation. So this is what they call a spring, home water spring. It's a cattle trough, essentially. And the water that's being piped in is sulfuric. I filled my bladder up, and it's just, a wretched smell and even taste. I think Garrett made me try it out just in case it didn't taste like it smelled, and it definitely tasted like it smelled. But however, we didn't give up. There was a second trough, and this green algae or whatever this is filtered out all that sulfur, and we were able to, in that second trough, we were able to get some, drinking water. And that was kind of one of the things, like, what do we treat out there? How do we treat? Do we bring a pre-filter, get all the sediment out? Eventually we went simplistic, and he brought bleach and I brought aquamira, which is a chlorine dioxide. And we just used that. We didn't pre-filter anything. We just drank, if there was a mosquito larvae in there, we just drank it, whatever. You'll see that fairly soon. And then we continue on. Now you're getting into really the off-route stuff, and just kind of picking your way through these canyons and valleys and all sorts of things. This is going into Young's Canyon here. And you can see it's not really a trail. You're just kind of doing what you can to move forward. And that includes some scrambling, some whatever you can do to just keep that continual forward progress. And, it's all dry and desolate out there. And then you get to where this is the first running water since the Colorado that we've seen. So welcome to the Hayduke. You just go and you make your way in. You have no idea what the conditions are. They can change from season to season. This is in the summer, so after the growth, and it was pretty gnarly. And in Young's Canyon, we touched up on the first water I told you we've seen. Very sulfuric. You can just smell it. But it dropped down and it met with an amazing canyon called Dark Canyon. So this is, I believe, Young's, butte or something like that. This massive formation here. And here's some more water. You just you take whatever you can get at this point. And you just put the droplets in, chlorine dioxide, and keep on going. This is in Dark Canyon, the first running water we've seen, and it was absolutely incredible, as you'll find out.
Oh yes, that is delightful.
Exactly our sentiment when we got there. It was just decent water, cold. It was just so nice. I mean, like I said, water was the biggest issue, at least in the first half of the trip. And here's Dark Canyon. You're just following the creek essentially, and you're following them on ledges. So you're crisscrossing constantly. Your feet are constantly wet. You're dropping down ledges, going to the other side. It runs out. You're just kind of meandering. There's obviously, like I said, no trail. And you can see here how Garrett's up high on the right ledge, and then all of a sudden it ends, and you got to drop down and go to the left side and continue on. And there's some old ruins here down in Dark Canyon. And it's just such a pretty interesting looking canyon as we were there. But we stayed there for that one day, and we hiked up a trail called the Sundance Trail, which is this very steep, and we hiked into the night till about 9:30, I think, that day. So the next morning, it was going to be our first point where we can get some extra food at Height Marina, which is just on one of the legs of the Lake Powell Arms. That they usually have boats and stuff there, but the Lake Powell has shrunk so much over the years that there was nobody there. And the store, there's a little mini store there, and Katie, who I believe happened to be closed on one day of the week on a Tuesday. We arrived there on a Tuesday, but she was nice enough. I knocked on her trailer. She opened up the door and opened the store for us. So we got food for the next couple of days until we got to our first main resupply point. After we resupplied for a couple of days before we get to Hanksville, here's kind of probably the crux of the whole route. This is class 4 chimney, and we're hauling up packs now because it's such a tight squeeze. We just can't go up with our packs, and it's heavy and it's awkward. And so here's another reason why you'd want a 30-foot 6mm cord, is to just haul those packs up and over. And you can see Garrett here following me, climbing up into this chimney slot. And then we got to these red benches. You don't see a trail, do you? So it's just off route, using our GPS maps, landmarks to kind of find the best way over, so we don't have to dip down too much and climb up, and just trying to find the best way to get down to, and here's the cover. So this is all the same. And this is when we first started to see the smoke from California. It's such a obviously big smoky year, and it's started to drift out here. As you can see right now, you can see the sun kind of a little more reddish. And this is exactly where we ended up camping, just sleeping under the stars. But you can kind of see the haze in the background. They call this the Jenga cairn. It's like an 8-foot cairn that's been around for a long time. And kind of one of the main landmarks on this section of these red benches. So we hit that early the next morning, and we dropped down. There's only one way into this canyon here. It's called Fiddler Cove Canyon, and you can see how spectacular it is. But there's literally only one way in, so you have to be really precise where you enter the canyon. Otherwise, you're going to get cliffed out. And I believe that's probably why they call it that. Now, Fiddler Cove was unfortunately short-lived, and we entered the Dirty Devil River. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but this portion of the trail, or on the route, I should say, is 5 miles of meandering in this creek, in this river. And you shouldn't drink the water. You see the water, but you shouldn't really drink it because it's fouled by the Fremont River, which has a lot of agricultural waste, a lot of heavy metals. We just didn't touch the water. And in a moment, you'll see kind of what the terrain was like. Soft mud, sloppy. You're crisscrossing the creek, so your feet are always wet. There's always muddy on it. You can see a lot of cattle track there. We didn't see many cattle in there, but you can kind of get a gist of what it was like. Just 5 miles of, I didn't really particularly like it or enjoy it. I was looking forward to getting out of there. And you just kind of cut through. If you can make shortcuts through the river instead of kind of doing the meander around, you can cut through the tamarisk stuff. And there's just a little lizard. This is the pretty one. We're having lunch. This is the evening. We got to Poison Springs Road Canyon, or Poison Springs Canyon Road. And that was really nice, actually, because it was a road, it was quick, and we got to our first hitch. We hitchhiked into Hanksville, which was about, I think, 20 miles away. And within 3 minutes, we got a hitch. It was incredible how fast we got there. So we got our stuff there, we got a resupply, and now we were able to we paid somebody to give us a ride back to where we left off that same day. So we spent the whole day doing laundry, resupplying, eating, just kind of catching up on stuff. And then we got a ride back out the same day. So we didn't even overnight. And we got ready for the Henrys, which is the last mountain range ever to be mapped in the United States. And this is kind of one of the last ranges where wild buffalo still roam. We unfortunately didn't see any. People have seen them, but we did not see them on this trip. And you can see kind of the fall starting to creep in. So this is probably September 18, 19, kind of in that area. You can start to see the leaves are starting to change. So this is the high point of the route too. It's 11,400 feet at Mount Ellen. So we go from being in the desert for so long, all of a sudden you got a 8,000 foot climb, whatever it was at the time, all on Jeep Road for the most part. You could start to see Garrett coming up this final bit up to Mount Ellen. Garrett hated this day. I didn't mind it. We both had our sort of ups and downs with the route in the beginning, especially. And so we descended this. You can kind of see the haze from the smoke. We descended this ridge line and then dropped down to Sweetwater Springs and camped for the night. So this was supposed to be not really reliable, but you know, it was sort of a 2 out of 4 score on whether it's reliable. And that's my dejected look, because those tanks are completely dry. There's not a drop of water, and we haven't had water since before the Henrys. So now we're, you know, it's just the stress of the water is really intense these early days. So I probably have like less than a liter left, and you're just sipping, having no idea whether the next water source is going to be reliable or not. So here it is. Here's a water chart, because it's been done enough. And it looks like, oh, wow, look at this. There's so much water. There's only 3.5 miles, 7.5 miles in between water. But the reality is the red marks none of those are water sources. So you're looking at Crescent Creek, and then you have 30 miles later, you have a springs at Canyon Junction, and it's hot. Remember, it's 90 degrees out there. So we're filling at the max pretty much every time as much as we can. And you can look at the score here that somebody put together. Andrew Skirka put together regarding the reliability for being very reliable. So, you know, question mark, you can see a ton of those. 2s are basically, for us, were nothing. 3s were questionable. Really, not many 3s were reliable. And this is descending down from Tarantula Mesa. This is what I call a transition day. There was nothing good on this day. It was just blah, just hated this day. It was hot and nasty. Put your head down, don't even think, just move on. So there were a couple of days where I called them transition days, where the scenery the next day was incredible, but the day particularly was just kind of crap. So here's a couple of photos here. This is one of Garrett's photos. Beautiful, beautiful snake. So here's thank God we found this earthen dam, and you could see how wonderfully nice it is. I'm joking, of course. It was at least cold, but we filled up to the brink, to the max here, because we have, you know, we don't know what our next source is. So we'll take whatever we can get. This is considered a good spring. And now we've moved past this transition day. Now we're in Capitol Reef National Park. I had never been there before. And it was a spectacular sunset, as you can start to see a little bit of it. And we just laid out. I mean, there's no other way to, there's nothing like the desert sky, like I said, and sleeping out like this every night was a blessing. So now we're entering what they call the Muley Twist in Capitol Reef National Park. Just in this 12-mile winding, beautifully graded, wash, and you'll start to see coming up. Here's a little kind of a T-Rex rock formation. That's kind of fun. But the walls start to get bigger. They start to get more impressive. Just the colors. And this is kind of one of the most, and these big amphitheaters that start to come up. So the walls start to get higher, as you can see here. And these massive amphitheaters that are just incredible. I mean, you could see how small Garrett is compared to the size of these things. I don't have to say, they were just a pleasure to walk through. So we get to Muley tanks on the previous chart. This was a 3 out of 4. It's overflowing with water and wonderful. And they were wretched. There's no other way to put it. It was hideous. You can start to see the color of the water here. We didn't have a pre-filter, so we just filled it up. And I think I have a little quote here that from my journal. We headed straight for the Muley tanks, large natural potholes that usually flow with water. Usually, in our case, it was a piss-colored, filmy, infested mud pool. I was demoralized, but with no other option, we filled up 5 liters of this iced tea. It had a tannin taste, but beggars can't be choosers, so we drank. So far, I haven't had the runs. Good sign. So that's one of those small little excerpts from that day, where you can kind of see it's like, you just got to drink, suck it up and drink it, and moved on. So we did an alternate here through the Hayduke. This little curvature here is the waterfold pocket. This is literally a wrinkle in the earth. And we traversed through Halls Creek there, and then we started going up the Slick Rock to get into Stevens Canyon. And this day was absolutely torturously hot. I mean, it felt like a kiln, I remember reading in my journal. But the evening, the sunset and the sunrise were absolutely spectacular. I mean, that smile says it all. It was, you know, it was unreal. And this is kind of where we bedded down for the night. And you're kind of walking the rims of these canyons. You're sometimes going in if there's no other way, but for the most part, if you can get to the edge and you're just kind of riding the canyons in, that's kind of the way to do it. This is the sunrise the next morning. And if you could spot Garrett, he's on sort of the middle, center left part of the screen. There's a couple little spicy spots, but he's right there. We're just kind of traversing high and we're trying not to slip in a little bit. I mean, it wasn't really that bad, but there were a couple of spots where you're just kind of not sure. We had to take alternates, go a little higher, go a little lower. Remember, there's no trail through here. And this is kind of what you're traversing, this kind of meandering, dry washes. And now we've hit the bottom. We just descended. There was a hill called Poison Ivy Hill. So you can see we're donning pants. Typically we wouldn't, but we wanted to protect ourselves as much as possible because they're literally just poison ivy rubbing up all over us. And now we're into the wash. So we rejoined the Escalante River. The original route follows the Escalante River, which is a complete nightmare if you decide to do it on foot for 25 miles. And so we did the alternate instead, and we were much better off for it. Some people pack raft the Escalante, which I would do if I was to do this again. But you can see the arch up there on the left side of your screen. That was kind of the big highlight of that day. It was Stevens Natural Arch. And just this massive arch. I mean, if you stood there, you probably couldn't see the person. They're minuscule. It's a really huge arch through there. And now we get to a really famous backpacking area called Coyote Gulch. And this is we didn't see we saw one backpacker for the first, 14 days. And we saw a ton in here. You need permits, you need all sorts of things. But it was an incredible way. This is an incredible place. There's a reason why it was quite popular. And we just meandered through this. Literally, our feet were constantly wet, just going through these arches and amphitheaters. And I mean, you could see how incredible this place is. I don't really need to say anything, I don't think. So we exited there, and my friend Doug was able to drive down the road, pick us up on this horrible 30-mile dirt washboard road, get us to the town of Escalante. We resupplied there, and then we continued on the route through an alternate from the town itself, so we didn't have to drive back down the road. And it was about 30 miles on the Caperwitz Plateau. This, not very scenic, but apparently there's a lot of dinosaur fossils out there, and we ran into I guess a paleontologist, an amateur one perhaps, who was digging out like a T-Rex or something. And it was just I would have loved to have seen that, but unfortunately we did it. And this is Grosvenor's Arch. That was kind of the highlight. And we had to yogi water, meaning we had to ask people for water, we thought, but people were just so nice because this is kind of a day use area that they were just offered us stuff. So we were able to get water from that paleontologist guy quite early or later on in the day. And this is the only slot canyon on the entire route here, Round Valley Draw. And we're about to descend into that. You can see it's a kind of a tight squeeze, eh? So we are working our way down, and soon enough our packs are going to have to come off, and you have this kind of big drop down where you have to lower the pack first and kind of shimmy your way down this rock. And now you're getting deeper into the narrows here, or the slot canyon. So after you exit the slot canyon, we entered Hackberry Canyon, and it was just a sand. Like, think about the deepest sand you can think of. You just had to traverse that for, you know, however long it was, 12, 13, 14 miles. It was hot. No water, of course, out there. And this is Watson Cabin, I guess, an old settlement that they're trying to restore. The BLM is trying to restore. This is that evening. So this is kind of funny. I mean, as you descend Hackberry Canyon for a ways, you just make a U-turn and you go up the Paria River. And, you know, this route, like I said, was circuitous. There's no rhyme or reason. You just want to see the great stuff out there. And the colors of the Paria just on the rock here were just incredible. And that's the river. They call it a river. I'm sure it's more when there's more moisture, but that's you're kind of dealing with this wet ground. And this was a really cool spot for petroglyphs that we saw. Unmarred, untouched. It was quite spectacular. And you have what they call the cowboy glyphs. Cowboys from the early 1900s, kind of making their own mark. You can see that in 1902. I think we saw some from the late 1800s. Just people that had been there that made their mark in the stone as well. And just continuing up the Paria. You kind of just see interesting formations here. We were just happy to be in water, to be honest, that have water that readily available. There was so much PTSD and we were so traumatized that anytime there was water, we'd fill it to the max. We had no idea where the next one was. Even if we were walking the river. And this is that evening in Sheep Canyon, which was a spectacular evening, I thought. So we went from there we resupplied in Tropic, which is this tiny, actually quite a great town, small little town outside of Bryce National Park. Now the authors originally bypassed Bryce National Park and they kind of just stick you down in the lower part, but I had never been there, and you know, there are crowds and stuff, and that was their reason, but there's no reason to bypass this. So we added miles to just make a loop out, or just to kind of just to see this. I mean, I had never been there. This was spectacular. One of the highlights of the trip for me. I mean, a giant smile was on my face, I think, pretty much the whole time. So that is a window arch, apparently. You can kind of see the llama head there on the far right. That was kind of fun. But just, I don't know. I was blown away. You can see more of those window arches up and to the left here. And perfectly graded trail. And this is like a luxury compared to what we had been on. And this is sort of the evening. These are the pink cliffs the next morning. We're meandering our way south through the park. And so in a couple of days of kind of uneventful days, hot days, we got to Kanab, which is our next resupply town. And you can get permits for the wave. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. They're really hard to get. You kind of have to be there. We did not even attempt it, but we stayed in town for a night, resupplied, kind of got our stuff together. I got a new memory card for my camera, et cetera. And then we found these really nice trail angels to give us a ride back to where we hitchhiked from the highway. And even though we didn't see Coyote Buttes, we call this the poor man's Coyote Buttes. They're kind of this uglier version, not the smooth stone of these petrified sand dunes, because that's what these are. But Buckskin Gulch was quite the treat right after that. So this is about 15 miles after we from our resupply point, and we started going deeper and deeper in. This is certainly one of the highlights, definitely. So from this point on, you go up to Wire Pass here to the right, but we took a little side trip just for like a couple hours down Buckskin Gulch proper. I mean, this is the sort of the beauty of the route. There are so many alternates. You can do anything you want. You can make this route whatever you'd like it to be and see some pretty incredible stuff. And this is part of that. So we've been in the desert, canyons. It's been hot. And all of a sudden we enter Arizona, and now we're on the Kaibab Plateau essentially. So now we're getting close to 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet, and you can start to see the aspens really changing. Fall's coming around, and it just, everything is a little bit colder now. We're on the Arizona Trail for about 30, 40 miles, or maybe 50 or 60 miles perhaps, to get to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. So now we've crossed over from Utah into Arizona, and now we're really starting to see the season changing. And I have to say, there was nobody on the route. We were the only ones out there. People who were started in the spring earlier that year got stopped. Nobody had completed the route, so we were really the first ones to get this far. And after about 60 miles, this previous night was our coldest of the whole trip. It was at 30 degrees, had everything on. It was cold because we were at 8,000 feet, or so, yeah, 8,000 feet on the North Rim. And this is the start. This is the Nankoweap trailhead, one of the most remote trails in the Grand Canyon, established trails in the Grand Canyon. And you can see the haze, obviously, in the background, the smoke from California affecting sort of the Grand Canyon, but kind of making it an interesting photo. And we descended down the Nankoweap, and we got to these, you can see these granaries right in the center of the photo. You can see these 3 perfect squares. This is where, you know, these ancient, probably Puebloans stored their grain and stuff like that. So I was here maybe a decade ago. Not maybe, I was there a decade ago, and I had seen them, but I didn't go up to them. You can, a lot of river rafting trips do that. And this is kind of one of those stories where we were going to ask for a hitch down the Colorado so we can get to the Little Colorado River. It's probably 8 river miles down. And we got to the Nankoweap Creek, filled our water, and we ran into a river group who were doing a day hike. And they were, one of the guides was like, sure, we'll give you a ride, and just talk to the head guides. So we get there really giddy and excited. We don't have to hike along kind of the strenuous part of the river when you can just take a raft down. And they were really standoffish and wouldn't really give us a ride down. They would only give us a ride across the river, but not further down the river a little bit. So we were pretty demoralized, and we started hiking down, and we ran into a private party, and they were the complete opposite of these people. They were really inviting and warm, and it was about 6 p.m. and it was like, we asked them if they can give us a hitch down to the Little Colorado River, and they said, sure, let me just see if we have enough life jackets. So the day went from being completely demoralized to ecstatic. We just set up on the beach of the Colorado, put our packs down, and then out, and they camped right below these granaries, so I was able to see them. And this was basically, to me, the best part of the whole trip. For me, it was a person, I've been waiting for this is mile 550. I've been waiting for this the entire route. And it was more incredible than I could have imagined. And I was just in bliss up here. And you're going to see in a second what I'm looking at and why I'm so thrilled. Mm. I mean, I could have sat up there for a long time. And that was the Colorado River. We're in the Grand Canyon proper. Those are the Palisade Cliffs way up to the right. So it was a pretty spectacular scene. You can see Garrett down there taking photos, checking out some ruins, but that's the Colorado River this is actually technically Marble Canyon. And those are the Palisade Cliffs way up high. It's at sunset. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. It was an incredible experience at that moment. You kind of see the panorama view of that with the granaries, just so we can go up all the way up to the granaries to the right, and then back down. So they were so generous with us. Food was always an issue as well. Not enough calories. I mean, we're hiking 20 miles a day in this kind of rough terrain in this heat. And they were so kind that they offered their food. So when we came down from the granaries that evening, they said, well, we're done with our dinner. You can have as much as you want, otherwise we're going to toss it out. So I think I had 4 plates of chicken pasta, and it was the most incredible thing. We were on cloud 9. We sat by a fire all night. We got drunk or high, depending on your preference. And it was quite wonderful, I have to say. And the next morning they shared their breakfast with us. And kind of takes a village to break these camps down. And the timing just worked out beautifully. And that's some of their party. And we're all getting ready to head down the Colorado. And if you can see there, this is Dave, second-rate river expeditions. And it was just, I don't know. This, to me, the Grand Canyon was the highlight of the trip for me, amongst others. But this was just really the top of the heap. And you can see it's just kind of floating down initially, and you'll see how giddy it is just to be on the Colorado. I mean,
holy shit! Or damn it, I already ruined the video. Damn.
so I was riding with Zach, and they call his raft Mr. Toad's Wild Adventure. Huh. He just hits the rapids head on, and we got soaked, but it was, I mean, it was everything. I couldn't even imagine this. It was incredible. So we just floated down the Colorado, hitting some rapids along the way for 8 or 9 miles. And you'll get to see here the Little Colorado. Oh, but along the way, sorry, I jumped ahead here. You can see desert bighorn sheep there. We've been wanting to see it for a while, but you can see them kind of hanging out there, right in those caves. You can see them all looking at us. I hope everybody can see that. I'm just gonna hold it for a second. But here we are, Little Colorado River. Take a look at that color. I mean, I think the calcium carbonate, that's from my understanding, it's really sacred with the Hopi tribe, and it just flows right into the Colorado River, and it was a sight I haven't seen before. You could just see how blue that water is, sky blue. And we have to ford it. So we got dropped off, we said goodbye, and we forded the river to get on the main sort of South Rim Canyon trails. And you can see a little bit of this picture, how the turquoise blue of the Colorado, Little Colorado, meets with the main Colorado River. So you can see just how that mix of that turquoise blue with the dark green blue. So the Grand Canyon, even in early October at this point, we've crossed the month. It's been 29 days perhaps. And this is the Unkar Delta we're on the main trail. I think we're on the Escalante, and we're just getting to the South Rim where our next resupply point is. This is, I believe, 75-mile canyon. You start really up high at the headwater, and you descend, and the canyon walls just keep getting bigger and bigger until you hit the river. And you can see a rafting party there. I think these are the Hance Rapids. Yeah, I think these are the Hance Rapids. And they are just getting pummeled out there. We were kind of waiting for a boat to flip, but no boats flipped, unfortunately. But we kind of were entertained for the time being. And this is Granite Gorge. If anybody's ever read anything from John Wesley Powell, this is down the great unknown. This had never been explored in the late 1800s. And this was, even on maps, it said unknown territory. Nobody had any idea. And these guys just went in there ragged at this point. They've been on the river for such a long time that they just went down into that great unknown. This is the sort of the Bright Angel level of the South Rim, or the south side of the Grand Canyon. So we got to the South Rim, we resupplied, another 7 days of food, and we go to the river back up to the North Rim. And then we get on the Colorado Plateau on the north side now. Now things are really, the yellows are really starting to come in. Fall is really starting to come around. And this is following that plateau along the north rim. We descend back into the canyon again, but for now we kind of stay up high. And this is what they call Teddy's Cabin, built in 1925 to commemorate Teddy Roosevelt, because here back in 1896, I think, he hunted for mountain lions here. You know, he was a big game hunter, and these are the exact grounds where he slept and hunted there. So they built in 1925. The National Park Service built this little cabin for him, and there was a little register inside, and we just camped right next to it. So the next the next section here, the authors considered the hardest section of the Hayduke. It was 4 miles long, so it's not very long, but it was the most tedious. Not terribly difficult, but just basically this is the cleanest part of the whole thing, but you're just 4 miles of just straight bushwhacking in the sharpest brush. Most, you're just intent. You're just kind of brushing things out of your way for 4 straight miles. It took us 4 hours, or just under 4 hours, to do that section. And remember, we're doing 20 miles a day. When there's trail, we're doing 30. So we're movers, but on this day, you only go as fast as what this terrain gives you. And now we're entering, this was Saddlebag Canyon, and now we're entering, I think this was called, oh gosh, forget the name exactly, but I think it starts with a J, but anyway, you just enter this little canyon, and we were expecting to be swimming in here because there'd be big pools of water, but it's been so dry and so hot that you can see the water levels are pretty low. So we just kind of shimmied our way down these little narrows here, and there were little pools of water. We certainly didn't drink out of it, but we had to kind of step in it, and there was a dead squirrel in one or something like that. I don't remember what, but it was kind of hideous. And you can see this massive dry fall. So you get to these things and you're like, oh, I'm going to be scot-free. No, there's a 50-foot dry fall. You have to meander your way around and figure out a way to get around it and down it if you can. And you can kind of see the ledge we're on. We're just kind of picking our way around. I'm wearing pants. I usually wear shorts. I'm wearing pants because the brush was so thick in the previous section. This is all off route, obviously. Really tough terrain. And now we get to Pete's Creek. At first it was dry, and then you can hear this thunderous sound, and all of a sudden you're in this massive river, and the route basically follows the river. You're walking in the river the entire time, and it's flowing really quickly. We're kind of keeping an eye on each other. We're staying to the sides. It's probably about knee deep at certain points. More weight is better. We took our hip belts off, or like loosened them up just in case we fell. Little creatures around the area. I actually took a spill in the creek when we were crossing it horizontally one time, and on one of the routes, and or on the Pete's Creek, and it was fine. I didn't get swept down, but you get soaked and you just move on. So we exit to Pete's Creek, and we run into what is called Thunder River, the shortest river in the world, apparently. It's like a half mile, but it's just this spring that spits out of the red wall at an incredible force and creates such an incredible scene, as you can see right here. I mean, the canyon's hot and dry, and all of a sudden you can see at the very top, maybe not 10 square feet of just water blasting through there and creating this little oasis. And we were so relieved because there was so much air and wind coming off the water. It was just cool. It was like air conditioning. It was quite wonderful. So we meandered through Surprise Valley, and we get to Deer Creek Campground, and then we get to these ledges. I think they call it Deer Creek Terrace, because you could literally put up chairs and an umbrella here, and it's so flat and nice. But as the creek starts to head towards the Colorado, it starts getting a little deeper, and we're kind of skirting the edges here. It's getting even deeper, and it spills into the Colorado. So we're about to kind of take those switchbacks down back to the Colorado River. This is in the evening time. And what you'll see next is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. As a 100-foot waterfall, Deer Creek Falls. The Colorado River is right behind where I'm shooting. I mean, it literally falls right into the river, and we had it to ourselves at 6 p.m. we just camped right on the sand and just listen and have that white noise as a background. And one of my favorite nights of the whole trip, I would say. And here's just a couple more photos of it because it was just so incredible. And you can kind of see Garrett there to kind of give it a perspective of how big it can get. So I'll backtrack here. So this is another section similar to earlier where we needed to get down the Colorado 8 miles. We didn't want to meander along the Colorado River. Why don't we just use the river, use its energy? But in this case, there wasn't anybody around. So we hiked the next morning and we continued down, and the first things we could smell were bacon. And we knew there was a group, and we started sniffing and we let our noses guide the way. And across the river there was a commercial river group, oars, and we smelled it, and there was a quiet portion of the river, and I said, that bacon sure smells good. And they kind of chuckled and said, come on over, as a joke, thinking that that we would swim across the river. And then Garrett blurted out if we can get a ride down the river, and they just kind of stopped in their tracks and looked at each other. The guides looked at each other and said, sure, just wait at the beach, down about 40 yards down from where you're at. So we walked down to the river, totally ecstatic. We didn't have to just walk those 7 river miles down while the river was right next to us. And we just sat for the next 40 minutes, read, caught up, and then they came by. Max, one of the guys, picked us up, threw us a couple life vests, and had 2 Ziploc bags of, one was bacon and one was pancakes. I mean, it was absolute heaven. Garrett is a vegan, so I really was in heaven because I just had all the bacon to myself. And Max was, I kept saying, he saw how voracious we were eating it, and he pulled out from one of his things a little pork chop from the night before. So here's my little selfie with the pork chop. That's a long story to make this picture, but you get the gist. And this is us going down what they call the ice box. So there were a couple rapids. This area does not get any sun on the river, apparently. So when we got soaked in the morning, you stay soaked. The sun does not touch you. So it was pretty chilly. And we were both riding the river. Now you can really see the desert bighorn sheep. The second time we saw it, of course, we're floating down the Colorado. You can see that one standing on that rock right in the center of they camouflage so well. But there was another way to see them. And so they dropped us off at Kanab Creek, this really remote, nobody really gets there unless you raft down or you come from the other side, which is a long ways in. And Kanab Creek was great in the sense that there was water, but it was also quite challenging. You can see this is kind of the easiest part of the terrain. Otherwise, when we go upstream, the boulders got really big, much bigger, and we had to just kind of do third-class moves up and around them and just figure out ways to get around these sections of creek. But also, on the other hand, there's all these side canyons, and you can explore. There's so much to explore out there. I mean, it's so untouched. This is still part of the Grand Canyon, and we did some side trips in there. You can see that little frog there. I mean, there's all this beautiful wildlife, and kind of right next to the rock, you can see that little guy. Hope you can see him. And you get pools like this. You can see how big the rocks start to get. And when you see something like this, you cannot help but jump in it, right?
Grand Canyon!
So it was hot enough, if you did this in the spring, this may not be your best option, but it was so warm, the pool was so rich that you had to do it. So you're winding your way, you see these side canyons, you start meandering, you start exploring. And you can see above here, where there's a white arrow, there's a spring way up there, and it's dropping little raindrops into this pool that's incredibly clear. And they call this Whispering Springs, as the water from 100 feet up just dribbles down into this beautiful pool. I mean, this was one of the side canyons. Obviously, there's nobody there. It was another highlight of the trip. And there's Garrett just, swimming and extolling the virtues of these water droplets that were just coming down. This is the last good water we had before we exited the Grand Canyon north. This is called Shower Bath Springs, and you'll see in a sec why. And that water was incredibly clear. So we stayed there a while. It was just, I mean, I think it speaks for itself. I don't need to say anything more on it. So that's how it looks. That's Shower Bath Springs right there. Just this beautiful section of the trail, but it starts to peter out soon thereafter. There's one of the few rattlesnakes we saw out in the wild there, just hissing at us from 30 feet. This was, we exited Jump Canyon. Now we're into Hack Canyon. This is out of the national park, Grand Canyon National Park, where we spent maybe 150 miles in the national park, terrain, areas I'd never seen before, especially on the western side. And now we hit what they call the Arizona Strip, just flat, open terrain for about, I think 30 miles, maybe more. I don't quite remember. We're on Jeep Road here, as you can see, and it's just flat and put your head down, get those miles in type of days. And you could see some pronghorn here just running across kind of in that early morning, just wild pronghorn just running. I had never seen that before, so that was quite a treat. And there's no shade out there. There's one particular tree on this route, and just kind of sat in cattle dung and kind of enjoyed the shade, the brief shade and respite for a moment. As you can see, there's nothing around except for that. We resupplied in the fundamentalist Mormon town, Colorado City, and Hilldale. They're one town, but they're on the border. They straddle the border of Utah and Arizona. And this is Canaan. I believe it's Canaan Mountain Wilderness, and it provided it was stunning because we didn't expect it. It was sandy the entire way, kind of thick, heavy sand. We're kind of figuring our way through, but for the most part, it was an incredible area, as you'll start to see. Another kind of poor man's Coyote Buttes. So now we were only maybe 2 days from Zion National Park, the terminus of this route, the western terminus, and but we had to enter the East Fork of the Virgin River. Everybody knows the Narrows in Zion, and that is the North Fork of the Virgin River. This is the East Fork. So we descend down. This is October 15 or so, and now we're going into the river, as you can see here. And there's nobody there. I mean, on this route in particular, every day we saw something, whether it's a car parked in the middle of nowhere, ATV, or we saw one person maybe. But on this day we had the East Fork to ourselves. And there were some spectacular petroglyphs here. And the scenery down the East Fork was, I mean, what a way to end the trip. This is literally the last day of the journey. This is day 38 or so. And this time you're just wading in the river, crisscrossing it through sand. Your feet are constantly wet or they're sandy. It's one or the other. It's never great. So you have to be able to manage your feet really well and kind of manage the situation. But you can start to see just how incredibly pretty this whole area is. You can see, you know how crowded North Fork of the Virgin River can get. Not a soul out here. This is a little bit of the crux of this whole river. You kind of had to descend this waterfall type slick rock thing. So this is the route in a nutshell. It's just not a trail for the most part. You just figure your way across, and honestly, it's most rewarding way to travel, in my opinion. Just you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, and you feel like you're really exploring something. This is another video of one of the side canyons we went to, just to kind of see what's there.
Nice job.
Oh, part of it is warm. There's some warm flow coming from somewhere.
That's my pee.
I didn't actually pee in it. I was just making a joke. But just there's so much out there. There was so many times where we could have spent 4 days just exploring this side canyon and doing some canyoneering. Oops. Here's another East Fork. You know, it was just kind of one of those days where you take a million pictures because it's just that spectacular. And there's a kind of a little unknown little plaque dedication to John Powell, Major John Powell, because he explored this river, as you can see here, in September of 1872. This plaque was erected 100 years later in dedication to that, and he named this canyon from the Paiute Indian word, Peronaweep, I guess, and Roaring Water Canyon, as you can see on the plaque. And here's just kind of, we went to explore further down and came back up, and this was kind of a nutshell of the whole day. So it was, we exited the East Fork up a trail called Fat Man's Misery. It was just really steep and sandy and warm, and now we're getting to Zion. I mean, we're officially in Zion, and unfortunately, I mean, the route originally ended in Zion Canyon. It went down the Weeping Trail, up the East Trail to end to the Weeping Trail, but because of the major rock slide, I think 3 years ago, that whole trail system is closed. And because of this bacteria in the water, we couldn't take alternate river miles or like kind of canyoneering ways to get to the Zion Canyon. So unfortunately, we just had at the end of the highway, Highway 9. But you know, that's the way it goes sometimes. That's kind of the route, I would say. It's just arbitrary, and you just kind of finish where you started. So this is 38 days, about 800 miles later. Probably the most rewarding trip I've ever been on in my entire life, and we've done some stuff. This is the last mile. It was anticlimactic because I didn't want it to end. I was kind of depressed that it was over, and just quite sad and dejected in some ways. And this is us. This is at the highway ending. So as you can see here. So I'm going to turn it over to David in a second here.
Wow, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful.
I don't know how long I went. I hope it wasn't too short or too long.
You took about 80 people along the route with you today.
Oh,
so I think
fantastic.
we all felt like we were almost experienced it with you. You told such a great story. So thank you so much.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
There's a bunch of questions, but I'm going to go first. Take the host prerogative, and then I'll have John read off some of the questions that the folks have put in the chat. And again, if anyone has any questions, use your chat function at the bottom of the screen. You can click on chat and then type your question in. So my question is about the gear. You started out talking, showing a picture of your kit, and obviously to cover that much, miles, you had to really get things as light as possible. What was your base weight without water or food?
I think it was 7 or no, just under that. I think it was 14 pounds.
Wow.
Which is for me a little on the heavy side, but we, this is kind of we brought camera equipment, we brought tripods, we brought extra water capacity. We kind of don't want to be out there getting screwed. So it was a little higher. I'd say 14 pounds, because imagine carrying 7.5 liters of water. What is it, 2 pounds a liter of water for 1 liter of water, and then 7 days of food. There was multiple trips, like many days like that, where we had to take more breaks than usual because it was just so backbreaking.
Yeah. So I'm sure John will be asking you some camera questions. Leave those to him. So what did you put your water in?
So yeah, so we have these 2 liter, well, they're really 2+ liter. They're 2+ liter platypus bladders that are kind of made this plastic that's foldable when it's empty. So I had 3 of those on top of a 1 liter hard plastic bottle, kind of like think of a smart water bottle, kind of a thin 1 liter one. So we had 3 of those that can probably take 2 1/4 each one on top of that 1 liter. So it kind of came out to roughly that.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned, you know, you're going in and out of the water with your feet. And did you carry the extra weight of like a water shoe, or are you just using your trail shoes?
I mean, honestly, trail shoes only. I did bring Crocs. I'm not really sure why. I used them in camp briefly sometimes, maybe to dry out my feet while we were kind of in camp. But for the most part, you just go through it. You can't avoid it. It would take too much time, and kind of the mileage we were doing, there really wasn't any time to keep switching shoes. And you don't even know, you're in the creek for about, for 4 hours, and all of a sudden you're in the sand. You just have no idea what you're getting into.
Right. So you had to have kind of all-purpose footwear. What were you wearing on your feet there?
These kind of aggressive trail runners called Hoka Speed Goat. And Garrett was wearing some trail runners as well. He actually had like 13 blisters, I think, the first like week or 2 weeks, just because of the constant change and new shoes and all sorts of things. So he was able to manage those well. He suffers well.
Okay. Wow. All right. So John, thank you. John, what kind of questions did the audience have?
Well, I'm just going to go down the list here. The first one was from Peggy Light. She asked how you purified your water. I think you covered that, but I'd like you to expand a little bit on how much water you planned on per day and how much did you actually get?
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, in the beginning, we learned quickly that you just carry as much as you can, as much as possible, unless there's a very reliable source that you know is going to have water. We carried at least 6 or 7 or 8 times 7.5 liters of water. And we just, like I said, we had kind of PTSD. Garrett used a few drops of bleach whenever he purified. I used Aquamira, these 2 bottles that you kind of mix the solutions in. But I would say we didn't use a pre-filter either. So whatever sediment, whatever was in there, we just drank. And, it kind of worked out. We never really had horrible stuff. We didn't really have any bad stomach issues. Yeah, I mean, I only purified maybe 50% of the time either. When you're thirsty, you're thirsty. Like, for example, we just drank straight out of Colorado without ever purifying or anything.
Jeez. Okay. There's a question about, is there any way to get to the Needles area without hiking or flying?
Yeah.
Can you drive there?
Yeah, you can totally drive there. There's established campgrounds and you can do day trips. It's not a very big park, but you need permits if you're going to stay overnight. And there were 2 rangers, kind of one serious, one not. So even in like 6, 7, 8, 10 miles, whatever we were doing in the actual park. So they're pretty strict on that kind of stuff.
All right. KB had a concern about flash floods. Were you at all concerned about them?
We were concerned. The thing about flash floods is you need rain. And we had, beside the first 3 days, and one day when we were resupplying, we had 0 rain.
Mm-hmm.
So no. But we just ended up camping in washes. It's kind of like the big no-no. Don't camp in washes. You never know. The flash flood could start from someplace else, but we were just like, we'll move if it happens.
Yeah, I hiked down Buckskin Canyon one couple of days, and the ranger there said that the floods that go through there start 100 miles away. So
yeah,
you can just never tell.
Exactly. I mean, but we kind of played. It's kind of the risk you take out there a little bit.
Sleeping in the open, any issues with desert animals, snakes, scorpions, etc. around you?
No, I mean, I was a little concerned because I had a quilt, so it doesn't actually fully close initially, but no issues with that. We had a coyote and deer enter our camp one time on the Kaibab Plateau, but I didn't notice them. And a little mosquito here and there, maybe on a couple nights that just kept buzzing in my ear. But generally, no.
Okay. And Ed adds, how about ticks?
I don't remember any.
Oh, that's nice. Peggy asks, did you usually hike near each other or more spread out as shown on some of your pictures?
I knew somebody was going to get to this. We're both kind of stubborn. We like our own pace. When it got to a lot of off-trail, difficult terrain, we stayed fairly close together. When we knew that it was going to be a long Jeep road or a long wash, we just kind of went at our own paces and just waited for the other person, maybe, miles down the way. So it's just kind of, think of it as an accordion. It was kind of like fluctuating. And look, you're spending 38 days with somebody 24/7. When's the last time you did that with anybody?
I just did that with my wife for almost a year.
Oh, there you go. And you're still with her, so good job.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, now we come to Susan Manley's got a question about camera equipment. Could you, she says, specifically while you were rafting, well, I would imagine you only had one camera on this whole trip. Is that correct?
I had the iPhone, so we used that, and then but I also had the Sony A6000, the digital camera. So for the rafting stuff, I tucked that away because it's not really waterproof, and I just use my iPhone for the videos and whatever else. If I could, you usually kind of have to hold on to the raft itself so you don't get flipped out while the rapids are hitting you. So I took what I can get, but I used the iPhone for interesting stuff, and then for the good stuff, I took out my regular camera. And it had a long lens. It had like a telescopic lens, so it was probably sitting that big. You'll see it in the gear. So it wasn't very light, but it was worth it on this trip.
Okay. Getting back to flash floods, did you have any way to get intel on flash floods during the trip?
Say that one more time.
Did you have any way to get intel on flash flood possibilities during the trip, or?
Yes, the guidebook in really bold black letters says flash flood potential.
So there's your intel. Okay.
There's your intel, and we just ignored it.
I love it. How was it coming back to civilization, especially with the climate of the times? Is Peter Asmus asking this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, California was completely smoke filled for that whole trip, so I was glad not to be there. But Utah's a different world. Arizona's a different world than California, so it kind of felt like normal. There was even a gas station on our first resupply that had a sign up in the window that says "No masks required." So there was a lot of rebellious stuff out there. But coming back, it didn't feel any different, to be honest. I was kind of sad to be back, to be frank.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Peter Parzali asks, did you take any 0 days while hiking?
None. We had short days, 9 miles to get to resupply towns. Probably that was our shortest day. We had really tough days where even hiking 13 hours, we did 13 miles. We averaged I think 21 miles a day in this terrain, which is I think quite high. But our shortest was like 9. We never took 0 days.
How did you charge your phone? Joan asks.
I had a little portable battery, A, and then B was in towns. Whenever you could scrounge an outlet. I think it was a courthouse in Kanab, or just whatever you can do to charge your stuff, because you're going to need at least 7 days. I think our longest stretch was 7 days multiple times between resupplies. So you can get 7 days worth of a charge, you're good.
So you didn't take a solar charger or anything like that?
Probably with the amount of sun we got, it probably would have worked, but it was fine.
Garlo asks, other than the tripod, was there any equipment you might leave behind next time?
I think I sent back, oh yes, well, my shoes, I had 2 pairs of shoes the entire trip for the first 550, where the shoes were absolutely almost disintegrating. And I threw those away and sent back the socks. But No, not really. We've been backpacking for a long time. He has done quite a few things, and I've done some stuff, and you just kind of know what you need to bring. So we didn't really mail too many things back. He mailed an umbrella back. He thought he'd bring kind of a sun umbrella. Barely, didn't even use it. So he sent his back as well.
Okay. Susan Manley asks, how many millimeters was your zoom lens? Did you cover that and I missed it? Sorry. if
I think
did.
it was between, I think 30 and 110, something in that range.
Mhm.
Now, it's really dusty out there. Your sand is a constant. So on a lot of the pictures, you'll have little dots everywhere just because it was really hard to keep clean and
Yeah.
accessible at the same time. You kind of want it for whenever. So I kept it in my side pocket and, it took its hits. Let's just put it that way.
Scott Connolly asks, any navigation challenges? How did you find the route?
There's plenty of GPS, well, not plenty, but there are GPS routes out there that you can upload into your phone via Gaia. And we used paper maps. We got a map set from previous through hikers that had kind of little dots along the way. You just kind of figure it out. Use map and compass on certain sections when you don't want to use obviously the battery of your phone, but you kind of like generally know you need to go east and make sure that you go down this particular canyon. So there was a lot of navigational issues, but we never were lost or anything extreme like that. We knew we were always aware of where we were at generally.
Well, you answered one of the questions. Did you ever get lost? Glad to hear you didn't. Howard Strauss is wondering, did you have a hard time hitching rides during the time of COVID? Did anybody turn you down for that?
Incredibly, like I said, we're in Utah, so it's just a different mindset. We were kind of concerned that we had a bet the first hitch, how long it would take. I said 50 minutes. I think he said like an hour and a half. I think within 3 minutes we got a ride. So we did have to wear masks on the boat trip on the second hitch on the Colorado River, but honestly, it went fairly smooth sailing. Like I said, we paid one person, I think, to give us a ride, but you'd find there's people out there that are willing.
Mhm. Susan asks, how much weight did you lose on the trip?
God, I wish I lost a lot. Not much.
Uh,
Maybe 2 pounds.
You probably don't have much to lose.
When we went to town, I'd eat a whole box of cereal. And just down it in one sitting with half gallon of milk. So we made sure that we ate when we got to the ground. So there you go.
Okay, the last question is from Melissa Y. Did you get any injuries? What did you bring for first aid?
First aid, what's that? What are you gonna do out there? You're in the middle of nowhere. So we brought I think I brought maybe some Advil and some tape for blisters. But for the most part, that was it. Maybe some Neosporin. But I had 2 blisters on the whole trip, just on the insides of my pinky toes, because the shoes were a little snug after a while. And they swole, because of the water and all sorts of things. But they didn't really bother me. Like I said, Garrett had a little bit more in the beginning, a little more issues, and he just brought a needle and punctured them and managed him. But other than that, not much else you can bring out there that's going to save you, except for you, really.
Yeah, that brings up my last question, and is, did you have with you a call for help button?
Yeah, like a
one of those.
or inReach. Yes, I had
Yeah.
one. Yeah, yes, I had one. Yep.
You'd certainly recommend that anybody goes back there like that have something like that, wouldn't you?
Generally, yes. Mine got stolen in January out of my car. But now that I think about it, it's like I'm not sure if I'm going to buy another one. There's something to be said about being very self-reliant out there and really knowing what you're getting into and not assuming that you can get out of it really easily by pushing this button. So I'm sort of hemming and hawing on it right now. Initially, I was not against it, but I just didn't care for it. Then I got it. Now I don't have it, and I'm kind of questioning whether I should get one. So, because you put other people at risk, and you kind of should really be aware of what you're really getting into.
Couple more have come up. Greg Killinger. I'm sorry, Greg Klinger is asking, did you need to use animal resistant storage for your food?
Yeah, I brought an Ursack without the liner, so just kind of a thicker Kevlar sack. And there were a couple rodents in the Grand Canyon that were trying to do something, but that was my main concern, was rodents. And it only happened a couple times. The rest was fine. I kind of just slept right next to it, so it wasn't an issue.
Okay. Melissa asks, were you scared at any point?
No.
Okay. And were you able to sleep well? That's a great question.
For the most part, yeah. I mean, you know, maybe initially when it's, you know, first few days, you're kind of getting used to being out there again, you know, go from the city to all of a sudden spending 40 days out in the desert. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but my God, after a while, especially in the Grand Canyon, it was so warm. Basically, you don't even need anything to cover yourself. And you're so exhausted by the end of the day, you know, and it's sandy and it's nice and you're so used to it. And I slept quite well.
Okay. Peggy asks, for each slot canyon you went into, did you know in advance that you would be able to get out of it without getting into a dead end? If so, how did you know that?
Well, the route was designed to, you know, there is an endpoint. Now the question is, can you go backwards? And a lot of the time is no. You know, we lowered down into them on slick rock, but to get back out, no chance. So we had the cord to lower our packs, and only on once did we pull them up. But for generally, there was a section where we literally slid down slick rock for about 10 feet to get to the bottom. There was no way to climb back out of there. It's just too, you know, just too much.
Okay, I think we're at the end of it.
One last question there is, everybody wants to know, what's your next adventure, Michael?
So this upcoming late summer into fall, I'll be attempting the 8th highest peak in the world in Nepal, Manaslu, and I'll be attempting it without supplemental oxygen. So I'll be doing that that's a 42-day expedition. So I'll be out there for a while and hopefully come back with limbs and life intact and success. So we'll see.
Wow.
That'll be for next year, David.
Okay. Well, we wish
for
you.
right now, you still got a couple more questions that have come up.
It keeps going.
It keeps coming.
Let me just say that that we all wish you a safe journey on that next one.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Roger asks, what will you do differently next time? Is there a next time?
Would I do it again? I mean, it'd be a completely different trek. I'd go in the spring and it'd be like night and day. I don't think I could ever replicate, but whatever I did on this trip was just perfect. I would change nothing.
Okay. Josh Spector asks, did you get any news or information from the world while you were out there?
He's a friend of mine. Well, the Lakers were playing in their, you know, I'm from LA, so the Lakers were playing in the championship, and I was constantly messaging, you know, when I could, my friend Billy on getting score updates and whether the Lakers won or not. But also Garrett, who lives in DC, said no political news for this entire trip unless it's an emergency. So he would randomly get text that says 9 out of 10, meaning the scale of the intensity of the political news. And he'd be like, so that happened twice. One was Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away. That was kind of a major one. And the second one was Donald Trump getting COVID. Those are the only 2 times he allowed political news to infiltrate this trip, because he's so into it and he works for the federal government. That was kind of that was it.
Hysterical. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for everybody for joining. That was fantastic.
And
The Lakers.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. This was fabulous. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, David.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Michael.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone.
Wow.